Annas obviously got back in the good graces of the Roman government. During the entire period of Christ's ministry, and for a long time afterward, Annas was the man who was responsible to a large extent for the actions of the Jewish Sanhedrin. Somebody else might be the presiding officer of the Sanhedrin, but Annas was the man to consult. One can imagine how whenever a priest would come up with a plan or idea and would broach it, another would immediately reply, "Have you cleared this with Annas?" He was exceedingly ambitious and fabulously wealthy. His family was notorious for its greed. The main source of his wealth seems to have been a goodly share of the proceeds from the price of sacrificial animals, which were sold in the court of the Gentiles. The traffic Christ attacked in the cleansing of the temple, which cleansing would really upset Annas. By the house of prayer had been turned into a den of thieves. Even the Talmud declares woe to the family of Annas. Edersheim adds no figure is better known in contemporary Jewish history than that of Annas. He enjoyed all the dignity of the office high priest and all the influence also, since he was able to promote it to those closely connected with him. And while they acted publicly, he really directed affairs without either the responsibility or the restraints which the office imposed. His influence with the Romans he owed to the religious views which he professed. You see, he was a Sadducee. To his open partisanship of the foreigner, and to his enormous wealth gotten from the temple booths which Christ attacked in the cleansing of the temple. Now we can understand how antithetic in every respect such a Messiah as Jesus must have been to Annas. He was as resolutely bent on Christ's death as was also his son-in-law. So Annas was a man of great influence among the Jews and the Sanhedrin, and his influence was very corrupting, for Annas was not a good man. He was not a senior saint, but a senior sinner. Though he was high up in religious circles, he would be a great encourager for animosity against the Lord, so taking Christ to Annas first would only get the wicked work started for the Sanhedrin. Christ could expect no clemency from this wicked man, though ironically Annas' name meant Jehovah is gracious. Notice the asking in this trial. The high priest, which was Annas, speaking of here, then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine in John 18:19. Annas began the trial by asking Christ some questions. We'll look at the purpose of the asking, the particulars of the asking, and the priority of the asking. Look at the purpose first. The high priest then asked Jesus, John 18:19. The purpose of the asking was to try and get Christ to say something the council could use against him. This had been a tactic of Jewish leaders during the ministry of Christ. As an example, then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk, Matthew 22:15. They watched him that they might take hold of his words, that so they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor, Luke 20:20. But every time they made an effort to ensnare the Lord in his words, they had miserably failed. For never spake man as this man, as John said in chapter 7, verse 46. This attempt to get Christ to incriminate himself through his words was totally unjust and reveals how corrupt the action of this council was and would be in the trials of Christ. Now look at the particulars of the asking. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine, John 18:19. Two main areas were involved in the asking. They concerned the disciples of Christ and the doctrine of Christ. The disciples represented the following of Christ, and this question would try to get some sedition charges against him. A man with a following often posed an insurrectional threat to the Roman government. The doctrine question would try to get some heresy charges against him, such as some teaching that would be in conflict with the Roman government, which would get the Romans upset with him. The council needed some serious charges in order to get the Roman government to execute the death sentence.